Oh, hello and welcome to episode 312 of the Stacey West podcast. My name is Gary, and if you added up the appearances of Percy Freeman on 181 and Regan Poole on 131, you would get to 312, which is today's episode. And working that out was like trying to play a game of darts. Somebody I wouldn't like to play a game of darts with, for obvious reasons, is Charlie Beeston, who joins me today. Charlie, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm sure you'd love to play a game of darts against me, just as long as we were in separate rooms, shooting at separate dartboards, and you didn't have to go anywhere near my darts.
I'd be happy if you had those, with the Velcro on the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll have to have a darts tournament, and you can rig it so that we play each other in the first round.
I didn't rig it. I didn't rig it so we could play each other. I've never been as scared in my life. Imagine that. Matt Wall beats a Welsh pool international in the first round, and I lose to, with the greatest respect, the blind guy. I don't like to label you as the blind guy, Charlie. It's a little bit detrimental to you, isn't it? You're also the guy that buggered off to Gibraltar and left us all here in great British weather.
Yeah, but now over here, I am just the blind guy because I don't have that edge to it.
You'll never just be that. How is Gibraltar? How are you getting on over there?
Very well. Hot. Very, very hot. But I started work this week. So that's actually been rather enjoyable. I've picked a really good time as well because tomorrow night is the office summer party and it is in my first week. And there's like an open bar and a shop bar and such. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Although I was telling my mum about it and she warned me not to be the person who has to go and visit HR on Monday morning. But that won't be a problem because it's a bank holiday Monday.
So it's on for Tuesday. Do you know what? Quick
Exactly.
Story. I did that once. So I went to a thing with Jewsons. It was like a training camp we used to go away to. The first one we did at a place called Crossthwaite Mill in the Lake District, and it was beautiful. And the second one was at a hotel just off the motorway in Coventry. Awful. But the first night, all these we were all Jewson's managers, and we all got together and we were all drinking, and it all got a little bit out of hand. And there was people from all over, and we were putting stuff on each other's rooms, and we were getting shots and all that, trying to charge it. It got really out of hand. And the next day, one of the women that we thought was a branch manager, so we all got kind of sat in, and we'd all had this great time. And all of a sudden, she walks in, and instead of sitting on one of the chairs, she goes right to the front. And she goes, "Hello, my name's such and such. We met last night. Some of you probably don't know that I'm the head of HR for Jewsons." And it was just like, oh my God. And it was the first break on that day was the frostiest things. We were all kind of walking past her going, that wasn't really a reflection of us. And she's like, "Well, you didn't know who I was." Like, yeah, cheers, great. So it was all good. Anyway, it was all good. So it's a big day. We're going to pad a little bit because there's not a lot for us to talk about. So we're not going to have a massively long podcast today. Chris isn't on, so we can stick to that as well. Excuse me. So it's actually GCSE results day today, which is quite funny because last week we did it on A-level results day and we tested Chris on flags and we gave him, I think, a B+ in the end. And after we went off air, he texted me or he messaged me or WhatsApp or whatever it was, the Haiti flag and the Liechtenstein flag next to each other, just to show that they were very, very similar. So first of all, GCSE results day, Charlie. Of all the GCSEs that you took at school, which do you think was the most useless?
Oh, do you know what? If you'd have asked me this a few years back, I'd have definitely said RE, religious education, because that was pointless, right? Why on earth did we have to do that? But actually looking back at it, there was like some of the exam questions that we spent time preparing for and such were like debate style questions. So you had to write arguments and counter arguments and such of like ethical dilemmas and such within religion. And actually that probably put me in a good stead then when I did like my A-level psychology and my A-level sort of government and politics and obviously my law degree. So maybe that was helpful. But I would still say no. I think German.
Oh, Chris is doing German on Duolingo. He's not going to be happy with you.
Now, look, I want to go to Germany at some point. I want to go do a weekend of football or whatever in Germany. But out of all the GCSEs, that was probably the most pointless one. It was also the one that I got the worst grade in, but it was probably the most pointless one.
I've got to pull you up on that. I think doing GCSE languages is better than doing half of the subjects that we did. I mean, okay, like you might go to Germany one day, and therefore you might need some. Explain to me how you would ever need to know how to rig up a Bunsen burner and burn off whatever they do. Or do you know what I mean? Come on, German, Charlie.
Yeah, okay. But how often do I need to go to Germany and tell them that last weekend I went to the cinema with my friends? Because that's all the stuff that you sort of did. You didn't do actual phrases that would help you out. You just got told to say the most basic, stupid stuff. And also, we only had the choice of French and German, which always irked me because I always wanted to do Spanish because Spain was always where I would travel to. So I would love to know Spanish right now.
Well, Duolingo. Although to be fair, Duolingo yesterday I failed it because the word I had to listen to was lotto, and the options they gave me was LOTO or LOTTO. It's like, come on. The people who I know who have spoke English for 40 years who don't know whether it's double S or double P and disappointed. How am I meant to be spelling stuff like that in Italian? I would, if I could go back now, because I took French at GCSE and I dropped it after a couple of months because it was just, I hated it. I knew La Rochelle like the back of my hand. People of a certain age will know exactly what I'm talking about there, the Tricolor books. But yeah, I dropped it and I actually took RE. And I would have put RE as the most pointless. But actually, had I not done RE, I wouldn't have understood anything about the Islamic faith or the big cube that they've got. Yeah. I wouldn't have understood anything about Christianity. I'm not behind either of them, but it gives you more of an understanding of culture. I'm going to put the most pointless at, and I do hope Chris Ray is listening now. GCSE maths, because maths up to GCSE, I get it. You need to be able to add and take away and times, and you need to be able to do all of that. Working out pi to 11 points, angles of triangles. Now, if I'd gone on to be a builder, or if I'd needed angles, if I'd gone on to be an engineer, fair enough. But for me personally, maths has been the most pointless because you should have been able to work out percentages before you get to GCSE. You can't do that, whatever.
Now, maths was the one that, funnily enough, I got the highest grade in. And then I didn't do it for A-level because I couldn't see. And there was going to be issues trying to do A-level maths because obviously then it became a lot more kind of shape-based and diagram work and charts and all of this sort of thing. And there was going to be too many obstacles and I didn't really see that much use in it. So even though I got that high, I probably agree with you. I think actually the rise in technology means that maths has been very much rendered useless to a high level now, because no accountant, for example, does maths in their head anymore. Everything's Excel. It's not an attack on all accountants. I'm sure some do still do something in their head, but everything can be easily achieved through Excel or other sort of models that you've got on your computer nowadays, to the point where sitting down and working with a sheet of paper just isn't done. So brilliant. You probably are right.
Yep, thank you. Well, I mean, that goes without saying, doesn't it, Charlie? It's the Stacey West podcast.
Yeah, sure.
I am right on my podcast. I say my podcast. I mean, obviously, I share it with two tremendous people and one other. You can work out which is which. No, I'm only joking. Of course, you're all three tremendous, great, big people. So we shall talk a little bit about football, because talking about GCSEs is making me feel bad, because I got worse grades than I should have done. But there we go. Now, we wanted to do a little segue, and we were worrying about how we were going to set the segue up. And as it happens, Harry Jackson has really helped us, because Harry Jackson has come in and said, speaking of Gibraltar, which we were doing earlier, which is where Charlie is, which is why his forehead looks sweaty, what is the connection between Lincoln City FC and Lincoln Red Imps? Now, I can answer that. I'm sure Charlie can as well. So Lincoln City were invited over to a friendly tournament in, I think it was at the end of the 1976 season, where we were going over to play teams in Gibraltar. We were playing, off the top of my head, Sheffield United, Blackburn and Wolves, I think, were involved in the competition. One of those was invited at last minute because Southampton were meant to be in it, but they made the FA Cup final. We had a director at the time called Reg Brearley, and Reg went over with Lincoln. He had some friends over in Gibraltar, as Charlie has, and the Gibraltans wanted help setting up a football team. I believe that Reg Brearley put a little bit of money into that on the assumption or on the basis that they would have some sort of link to Lincoln City, but they didn't want to call them Lincoln City specifically, so they were named the Lincoln Red Imps. How did that sound, Charlie? About right?
It was about right, yeah. And it's a really sort of cool story as well, because although there isn't any sort of official links now, there is still that kind of, like you say, familial link from the past that always makes it a bit of a hot spot actually for some Lincoln fans to come over and want to get a game over here to come and watch. And I was sat down at one of the bars on Saturday. I took my laptop down to go and watch the game, and some guy came up to me. I was wearing my Lincoln shirt, and he recognised the shirt, and we got chatting. It turns out he played for Gibraltar's under-17s in a friendly at Sinsel Bank back in 1984, which I loved hearing stories like that. It was great sort of talking about that. But Lincoln Red Imps have got a very tough season ahead of them. I think there's a few teams that are certainly going to be going quite strongly into the league this year, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. But before that, they've got a European qualifier. So they've actually done really well in the European qualifiers so far. They are now in the fourth qualifying round, which is the last qualifying round of the Conference League. Now, they are playing against Larne from Northern Ireland. The first leg is tonight. Really annoyingly, though, the stadium over here in Gibraltar isn't able to host the fourth round game. So it's being played in the Algarve over in Portugal, which means I'm not there. I can't go, which I really wanted to watch this one. And if they can beat Larne over the two legs, they could end up facing teams like Chelsea. I think they're the Premier League team in the Conference League, or even a little team from Ireland called Shamrock Rovers, who could have, well, if they do play, they very much will, have a certain Danny Mandroiu in their squad.
Now, they also play their Conference League qualifier, I believe.
Europa League qualifier.
Europa League qualifier. So if they get beat, which I think they probably will by Panathinaikos, PAOK of Greece, PAOK of Greece, they'll then drop into the Conference League. So they have qualified for it anyway. So Danny Mandroiu will be playing European football next season. And that leads us smoothly, but a little bit longer than I'd expected, to our first order of business, which is Danny Mandroiu we wanted to talk about, because obviously Danny was one of the players who left the club over the summer, offered a new deal, chose not to take that. Now, my understanding was that the terms of re-engagement were the same terms that the two players, Danny and Ted Bishop, were on last season. So I think that we would have kept both of them if we could. But Danny was offered new terms. He turned them down. He was linked with Blackpool, but he has now signed for Shamrock Rovers. So the discussion here really is around whether we think that is a step up or a step down. And I put an article out yesterday, and it was widely thought that it was probably a bit of a step down. But if they do get through to the Europa League, they could be playing all manner of teams, even the Conference League. Like you say, it's Chelsea. I think Lens, Roma possibly in it as well. That's got to be a big draw for a player, hasn't it? Rather than playing Manchester City kids in the EFL Trophy.
Yeah, of course it is. I think, first of all, it's probably a bit of an insult to call it a step down. Like even if you maybe think that it might be, I think there's like a potential level of arrogance if you're not careful to say that, oh well, that must be a step down because it's the Irish division. It's the Farmers League, as some people like to call it. And I think that's an unfair reflection on the division, especially when we do quite a lot of shopping in that division. The way you got to look at it for his point of view, it's a 6-month contract. Could just be an opportunity to try and get his name back out there and kind of showcase his ability now for the next 6 months, both in the Irish League and in the European competitions. Because a lot of EFL sides, if his idea is to be coming back over to England, a lot of EFL sides do scouting over there and obviously do try and get players across the Irish Sea. He's still young enough, obviously. You know, he's still probably even before his prime, let alone in it or past it. So if he can rekindle the sort of form that I think on his day he's got, he'll be wanted by a lot of teams come January, potentially then into next summer as well, depending on how his future is. I think it's a great move for him. He's got the technical ability. He was probably nil asseted by Mark Kennedy. I'm not saying that Danny Mandroiu hasn't got an EFL move because of Mark Kennedy, but there was a good chance that he could have been viewed in a higher light if it wasn't for some of the comments, for example.
It's a retreat, isn't it, Charlie? It's a retreat, isn't it? Go back home, tail between the legs. He came from Shamrock with an idea of, like, sorry to cut you off. I'm not sure it's a good move. I think it's hard to compare. I think it's hard to compare the Irish League and League One. And even in doing that, people in Ireland and listening in Ireland will go, look, this is the main league. We can get into Europe. We can do this or that. People who go and watch Lincoln will go, well, you get 5,500 on average. You got 6,000 for a European qualifier the other week. We've got 9,500 going to watch us play Mansfield Town on a run-of-the-mill game in the middle of the season. So what is a big club? Is a big club somebody that can get into Europe? Tonight, as you say, if Lincoln Red Imps beat Larne, they'll get into Europe. Does that put Lincoln Red Imps as a bigger club than Lincoln City? I don't think so. Incidentally, Lee Bonnis from Larne has just signed for a Dutch side, so won't be playing tonight, which is a massive bonus. A player that we were looking at as well. I don't think Mark Kennedy's comments affected Danny Mandroiu getting a move. I think they helped highlight elements of Danny Mandroiu's game that will have stopped him getting a move. Mark Kennedy didn't make Danny Mandroiu lunge in against Burton, and Mark Kennedy was long gone when he lunged in against Bolton Wanderers. Mandroiu on his day is a quality footballer. I don't think his head is entirely right for being a footballer that plays away from Ireland. I think he would be happier being the big fish in the small pond. That's why he's gone to Shamrock. Because Shamrock can play in Europe, and it's a shop window. And I would liken him, and it's before my time, and it's a long way before your time, but maybe a little bit to a player called Brendan Bradley, who came over from Ireland with Lincoln, didn't settle, or didn't have particularly the attitude problem, which some people believe Mandroiu did. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. I dispute that. We'd be wrong to say someone's got an attitude problem when we don't know. But Brendan Bradley went back over to Ireland and absolutely smashed it. And so there's that lack of settling. Chris Fagan as well. Chris Fagan's a bit of a hero at, I think, St Patrick's Athletic, but didn't settle at Lincoln.
I still have faith that Danny Mandroiu will thrive in the EFL.
Really?
Because I think he's got the technical ability to do so. I think, all right, maybe he has got a little bit of learning in other areas of his game to do. But I made the point after his red card against Bolton that I think he will thrive in a team that obviously has a lot of the ball, but basically anything that wasn't the Mark Kennedy team and maybe a little bit more the Marcus Kubala ball. Now, you can then evidence the second half of the season when we were doing really well. He didn't ever stand out as the standout player during that 6-month period per se, but he was also playing out of position. He's more of a number 10. That was kind of what was billed when he came over to us in the first place. So I just think it was not necessarily wrong club or anything like that, but it was probably just maybe even the right club just at the wrong time for Danny.
There we go then. We'll put a tenner on it. He's 25 now. I say by the time he's 30, he hasn't played again in the EFL. 10 quid.
I'll go one step further. By the time he's 30, he'll have played games in the Championship.
Well, I'll put 50. I'll put 20. No, not 50. Jesus, 20 on that.
Deal.
I'll give you 20 quid that by the time he's 30, he's not played in the Championship. Deal. One player who could, of course, play in the Championship, because from what we understand, he's a decent player, is Erik Ring, which brings us succinctly onto our second order of business, which is the potential capture of Swedish under-21 international Erik Ring. Now, Chris and I have spoken about this at length, but there have been quite a few developments this week with the player. So he was in AIK's squad, I think, at the beginning of last week, over the weekend, and then there was a news story went out after the weekend that basically said that he was ready to come over to us. So he's visited Lincoln. He had already said that. His exact words were, and you might have been able to tell there, I was padding a little bit. It was a nice city, very good conditions with nice training facility, good grass and several pitches. I love being in an AIK. I love the club. It's nice there is interest from Lincoln. It's a good team and a better league than many people think. And I think that's quite amusing because it's that reflection of where you are and what you perceive a league. And when you're looking at the top league in Spain, you're looking at the third division in Lincoln, or in England rather, they're thinking, "Pool, that's not a great league." Whereas we're thinking, well, Zach Elbazedi went to play for AIK and he couldn't get a kick for us, Vikings League. Anyway, and he said there are a lot of good teams in the division now. Also, Thomas Berntonson, who is the sporting director at AIK. Stop laughing at my pronunciation. He says, I cannot name specific clubs, but we're in dialogue with a club regarding a sale of Erik. So we'll see in a day or two if that happens. I'm actually going to talk to him after training today. It is up to Erik how he wants to do it. Erik is welcome to sign a longer contract with AIK. If he chooses to move, he's always welcome back. He's a great person, a great player. Whatever he chooses, we support him. There were pictures on a certain message board site, I believe, of a suspiciously Scandinavian-looking player at the ground yesterday. So it does feel like this is a move that's edging ever closer, Charlie.
Yeah. Look, we don't go after a player sort of this long in the transfer window if he isn't a sort of a top target on. I don't really like the term shortlist. It's a very kind of FIFA or football manager thing because you don't really have shortlists per se in the transfer market when it's as fast moving as a transfer market like this is. But he's clearly a player that the club want. He's clearly a player that Jez and Michael obviously rate. And it's in a position where I think we're definitely going to be needing not even just cover, but potentially even a first team ready player in the very short term future, especially if situation with Dylan Duffy does change, which obviously, as we know, could just happen at the drop of a hat. I think this is a great bit of business. Obviously, I know you and Chris will have probably said the exact same thing. I think it kind of is great that we've got this a Scandinavian player this summer because Jez said it at the start of the window that it's the market that we want to be shopping in. And then as it got closer and closer to deadline day, and as July and August progressed, everybody was like, well, hang on a minute, where's our Scandinavian? You've said we're getting a Scandinavian. And sometimes that's the thing with football clubs. We want the likes of Jez and Michael Skibala and Scully, everybody to be really transparent. But then if they say that they're planning on doing something, but then it doesn't happen, people are then like, well, hang on a minute, you failed. That's not what happened.
It's a really good point, actually, Charlie. And even your language there inadvertently kind of it reflects what people think and say, because you said Jez went out and said we're getting a Scandinavian, but he never did. He said we were looking at the Scandinavian market. But that's not a dig at you, because as soon as he says that, people go, well, where's the Scandinavian? Where's this going to happen? Where's that going to happen? And I actually think we do have shortlists. I think they do exist. I think that we will have, certainly when thinking back when we signed Luke Plange. I remember having a chat with somebody at the club who said, look, this is what we want to do. And it was with loaning out Tom Hopper. You remember that? We had to get rid of Tom Hopper, and we took a risk by letting Tom go to Colchester and not having a replacement in place. Because if we let Tom go, then we can sell it as there's a space up top. And I was given a list of players that we had in our sights that we wanted to sign. Two of those players, by the way, have since gone on to play significant numbers of games in the Championship. The other one was dog shit for us, poor for Carlisle, and is now over in Finland, which, I don't want to argue if the Finnish league is better than the Irish league or not, but we'll look at the qualifiers and see who's there and who's not. So, but going back to Erik Ring, what I'd also say, you mentioned, he might be coming into play. He absolutely is, because he also said playing time is very important. It was the same when I was on loan last time, which was at Helsingborg. I got to play a lot and grew a lot as a player and a person. I'm in very important years now and I want to play games. He's coming here to play. He knows almost certainly, bear in mind he's been playing left wing for AIK. He's almost certainly somebody that we're expecting to play left wing back. He can play on the right side as well. Look, there might be a late hitch. There might be some issue. But it almost feels like it's in, I'd say, black and white. It almost feels like it's written in red and white, doesn't it? That it is happening. Potentially, we could be looking at an announcement if everything goes well. But people, please don't think I know any, because there's been nothing under embargo. I don't have any inside information as to whether it's definitely going to happen tomorrow or not. but you would feel that, let's say it was him pictured at the ground, it feels like formality, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And all I will say is all he has to do is be registered by midday tomorrow. Doesn't matter if he's announced on social media, just be registered by midday tomorrow. And bearing in mind, when we brought in Mide Shodipo for the first time,
Thinking that.
Well, yeah, we registered him in time to play against MK Dons on the Saturday, and he wasn't announced until 1:30 on that day. So, we don't need to tell social media until the team sheet comes out at 2:00 on Saturday whether or not he's registered or not. So that there's no rush. If not being announced by tomorrow night on social media, for example, doesn't mean that he hasn't signed. It just means that we are choosing when to announce him, and the club will be smart with that. They might want to let Mansfield think that we haven't got him, and then boom, half an hour before team sheets come out, there he is announced, sort of thing. So always
or we haven't got him, or he's come over and has decided not to stay. These things happen, and I think about the Trey Hume, where Trey Hume, who's at Sunderland and he's been valued at 10 million, and he's absolutely massive, and all that sort of, he's massive now. He was at the training ground. He had been to watch Lincoln. He was going to sign. I don't know if he'd had his medical or not. It's potential that he had had his medical. And then Sunderland came in at last minute and took him. If the Erik Ring story has got kind of released and somebody else has come in and gone, well, actually, we want to buy him, he might have come over to England and been snaffled away by somebody else. So you never know. And that's not just Erik. That's with all transfers. You talk, there's lots of talk about Joe Taylor, isn't there? And how many times have we heard this summer? He's been to Huddersfield. He was seen at Barnsley. He's been here. He's been there. He might have been. He might have been absolutely everywhere, but it never actually means anything until. And Steve O'Dare, I'm sure he doesn't listen, but he would love this. The only time he gets excited about his signing is when they are pictured in a Lincoln City shirt.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to add as well, because obviously you mentioned it earlier on about, it's kind of topical because we're talking about Danny Mandroiu and Shamrock and the level of the league and all of this. And we're thinking the same maybe about the Swedish league and the level of AIK and the fact that Elbazedi went and got regular game time there but couldn't really get a shoe in for us. Bearing in mind, we bought Ben House from Eastleigh. That's down in the National League. He wasn't exactly ripping up trees there. He comes to us, and he's arguably one of our most pivotal players. And he has been over the course of, really since he's been here, obviously, injury last season aside. Sorry, go on.
The thing is that you can find players that will always make your point about a league, and we're going off on a tangent now, but remember Rory Deacon, who was at Sutton, and he went off to play for Dundee. So he went from the National League to the Scottish Championship, I think. So is the Scottish Championship comparable with the National League? Well, Dylan McGeoch, who was at Celtic and Hibernian, came to play in League One. So does that mean the Scottish Premiership's that size? But then John McGinn is now playing Premier League. So I get your point entirely. I just think it's always hard to compare club size, and it's hard to compare league size because people will say to me, we're a bigger team than Mansfield Town. And on recent history, yes, we are. Overall, generally, will Mansfield, if they had a full stadium, could they attract 10,000? There have been times when they've been a bigger team than us. Size is absolutely all relative, but it does let me lead in to Harrison's comment. He says, if Erik does sign, and it isn't if, it signifies how far Lincoln have come over the years. Attracting international players is a huge step forward. And I think that's a nice point to finish the first half of the podcast on. Do you agree, Charlie?
Absolutely. I very much agree with the point.
Excellent. Right. So that brings us on to the second half of the podcast. If you are, this is going to get complicated. So if you're a patron of the site, and you may be listening through Patreon, because I'm going to try and upload ad-free versions to Patreon. So if you're listening on Patreon right now, you won't get an advert. And you can also join in the chat on our Discord. And by the way, the Patreon's been taking off. Loads of people signing up. It's £2.50 a month. We've got great chat going on the Discord. It's actually, I just found out Lee Bonnis had gone to LAN because I got a notification from Discord on my phone. So you're not going to hear anything. If you are listening at home on Spotify and all that sort of stuff, you're going to get an advert. If you're watching now, you're going to get me and Charlie looking awkwardly at each other going, what comes next? And if you're watching this in about 8 weeks' time, there could be a YouTube advert in the middle of it. Jesus, I think all that's right.
The irony of that is that you explained that took longer than what an advert would have done anyway.
I know. I tell you what, we'll go to an advert, and when we come back, we're going to drop onto our Mansfield preview. We're going to go straight into it, and Ben has been chatting to Craig from Mansfield Matters about the game. Sorry, Craig, if you're watching that. Of course, Mansfield Matters. Yeah, because Ken Bonsall, the lead singer of my favourite band, or one of my favourite bands, Ferocious Dog, is a Stags fan, interestingly enough. So, well, I say interestingly, it's not at all. Roll VT. Errol.
You've got those 6 new signings. They're settling into the group. How is it at the minute that Mansfield are setting up and playing? Is it differing from last season too much, or is it kind of more of the same, but with a little bit more quality in the side?
It's the same, but with a slight little bit of a twist. I think we are learning a few lessons about this level. The key one is, we go to Barnsley on the opening day and we 2-0 up quite early doors. We're playing the way that we were in League Two. It's looking quite good. And then they score a very freak goal and that really rocks us. And then for the rest of the 60, 70 minutes, we're getting peppered and we're clinging on and we defend superbly. They miss a few gilt-edged chances. We make a couple of good saves and we get away with it. The Burton home game, you're looking at that as a side that's wanting to stay in the division. You're thinking, well, these are the games that must win. But then you've got to remember that Burton have signed about 9,000 players and had a takeover, and they're gelling as a group as well. So they're a very different prospect to the Burton side that fans are used to, and they come and give us a real good game. Again, we score quite early. We then make a mistake and give away a cheap goal, 1-1, and it just goes. It's one of those games which the pendulum swings, and at one point, we're losing 3-2, and we're thinking, Christ, we've lost our first game in League One, but we really commit to it at home, and we've got a side that really do play to the very last whistle and don't give up, and we get a penalty, and we stick it away for 3-3, and we're very happy to walk away at 3-3. And I think what we've learned from that is, in League Two, we miss an abundance of chances and we get away with it. In League One, we miss an abundance of chances like we did against Burton, like we did against Rotherham in the Car Cup or whatever it's called this year on Tuesday night, and we get punished for it. And that's the difference between the levels, really, and that's what we learn in sort of early doors. So we're very much playing how we were last year. We try and play on the front foot. We try and play possession-based football through the midfield. We try and get the ball into the box, try and get crosses into a good area, and we try and take our chances where we can. I just think defensively, we're a little bit not as sharp as what we were last year. We've obviously got Aidan Flint at the back. He had his worst game in a Mansfield shirt against Burton. He came out on Instagram and apologised straight away. So I'd expect a bit of resurgence from him. But you just never know at this level, do you? I think Nigel Clough plays the Nigel Clough way, and he doesn't deter, he doesn't alternate from that. He's very stubborn. So it's worked so far for us. So as long as we're getting through enough games and we're being hard to beat, I think that's all any fan can ask for, really, isn't it, at this level?
Brilliant, thank you. So that's Craig from Mansfield Matters, who actually spoke very, very well. I quite enjoyed that. We don't usually get to listen to the preview, but Ben's clipping them up, or I think hopefully you might as well, so that we can drop them into the live shows as we go forward. The full version of that will be on YouTube a little bit later on. And it will also be available to view through the website. So that's interesting stuff. Now, I've done doing my research on Mansfield. There's a few really interesting facts. First of all, last season, they were very, very good. So they only lost 8 games, which was fewer than Wrexham. They conceded the fewest goals in the division. They scored the second most goals in the division. With Davis Keeler done on 22. Now, he's been heavily linked with Barnsley over the summer. I got my fingers crossed that was going to come off, but it hasn't. So he's still there. So he plays for them tomorrow. Now, looking at their XG, they've got the second highest XG in the division at the moment. And with 5 goals, they've scored the joint highest number of goals in the division. They lost 2-0 to Rotherham in the Mickey Mouse Trophy over the week. Their XG was 1.55. Rotherham's was 1.04. They drew 3-3 with Burton last weekend. Their XG was 3.89. Now, that is actually incredibly high. And even when we beat, I think, Cambridge 6-0, our XG wasn't that high. But Burton's was 1.56. So, again, teams are scoring against them. From an XG of 2.5 over the last 2 games, they've conceded 5 goals. They were moderate in terms of attacking threat against Bolton and Barnsley and conceded 1.32 and 1.26 XG. So they are susceptible to conceding chances and they are susceptible to conceding goals. I know what you're thinking there. They're susceptible to losing games. I can see it on your face. But Joe, what, I think they were the team that have come up this year that people aren't talking about because they're not Stockport, they're not Wrexham. But I think they're the team that have quietly gone about their business and they look, pains me, half decent.
I agree. And I kind of struggle to predict where they would be in the league this season. And I think a lot of people did because you see a lot of variation. Some people have got them as high as maybe a 14th, 15th. Some people have just got them in the relegation zone. I mean, I don't see them getting relegated, but I think there's a lot of kind of unsurety around where Mansfield are going to be come May next year. And then you think, okay, well, let me have a little look at some of the stats like you were just going through there and have a look at some of their match highlights and such from the first couple of league matches. Because, to be fair, you can look at the cup games, obviously, as much as you want, but they're cup games and you can often sort of make excuses for why certain things aren't working or make excuses for why certain things are working because of the opposition and so on. But they came up against the Burton side, who are very much still in transition, and they are going to be for the first half of the season. And they came up against the Barnsley side, who, we spoke before the podcast. I think it was you and Chris last Thursday, and you mentioned this was probably the best time of the season to be playing Barnsley. Might not have worked out like that, but it was because they are also a team in transition, and you couldn't really read too much into their early starts of the seasons. But they're playing against Mansfield, so I'm still struggling to predict exactly how Mansfield are going to do this season. I really want to see a little bit more from them. Look, they clearly can score goals and they create a lot of chances, and that's brilliant. And that is very, very worrying from a Lincoln point of view, considering the fact that we are conceding a few goals at the minute. We've not yet kept a clean sheet yet in any competition. We've conceded 2 goals in all 3 of the games, haven't we? There could be a good chance that we do that again on Saturday. I think Michael Scaballo's probably will have worked on our defensive work over the last couple of weeks on the training pitch, especially with Burton on the opening day. We created some easy chances, even ones that didn't go in. They were easy chances to give away, and you probably say the same against Barnsley as well. So hopefully we can shore that up, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being a very, very end-to-end game, very similar to Burton on the opening day, especially that first half.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a tougher challenge than people may think. I think because they've come up, you think, well, we can swap those aside. Really interesting. Lucas Akins, who used to play up top for Burton, is now playing right back for Mansfield. I really liked him at the time. I always thought he was kind of a physical unit. He missed a penalty on the final game before COVID, if I remember, that Josh Vickers saved. They signed Keanu Bacchus in the midfield, who I think is an Australian international. A player that I when I say I really like, a player that I think could be quite big. They've got Stephen Quinn there, who was obviously one of Clough's generals at Burton Albion. There's a real Burton Albion feel, I think, to this side, not just in the way or a Nigel Clough Burton Albion feel, but not just in the personnel, but just in the way that they play as well. They've also got a former imp, which is going to be an interesting imp that I think a lot of people used to think was probably going to go on and do better things, but used to have a few issues, I think, away from the pitch. But in Aaron Lewis, which is going to be, I'd say it'd be nice to see him back, but nobody really cares, I don't think. He wasn't one of the big players for us. But it's interesting that he's gone on to have more of a career in the Football League than I think people give him credit for, because he came to us, didn't he, as a former under-21. He didn't really make it with us. He went to Newport, and you thought, he'll end up playing for like Conway Bay or Colwyn Bay or something very soon. So he's done quite well for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see him come back to the bank, because he only moved this summer as well, didn't he? I believe. And yeah, Mansfield have got a really interesting squad. Like you say, they've got some good players. They've got some big names as well, bearing in mind. Like Lee Gregory, for example, is a big EFL name. A lot of people will know the name Lee Gregory, a name that I think some people might not know as much, but who I would say is their Ethan Arahan in a number of reasons, is Keanu Bacchus, who they brought in this summer as well, funnily enough, from St Mirren, which is obviously where the comparison comes from. But 26-year-old Australian international was playing against Lionel Messi in the World Cup 18 months ago in the round of 16 or group stage or whatever it was, and is now playing at Sincil Bank against Lincoln for Mansfield Town. that was very much their big coup of the summer. But what they've also done is they've kept a core of the squad. Like you say, Davis Keeler-Dunn staying is huge for them. And I don't think you can underestimate getting promoted and keeping that core of the squad. When you look at a lot of the teams that make those big steps and make those steps up into the next division, actually the ones that end up having massive overhauls quite often do worse than those that just simply keep the core of the squad and just make the additions where they feel they need to make them. And that's what I think Mansfield have done quite smartly. I've been impressed with their business so far.
What I'd say about Bacchus as well, he's not actually been playing the holding role according to Y-Scout. Haram Boateng, who we know well from his time at Exeter, has been playing there, and Lewis Reed is a player that a lot of people rate as well. So look, we're actually raving a little bit here about Mansfield Town, and we've done that it feels quite awkward. But I also feel a little bit more relaxed doing it than I did when Steve Evans was there. Because like when Evans was there, they were this bitter rival. And although as the crow flies, I think it's the closest ground to Sincil Bank, but they've never felt like it's a local derby, yeah, but it's never felt like it's the Grimsby or Scunthorpe or ours. Grimsby would argue we're not there, right? Do you know what I mean? Mansfield's always that kind of, we don't like the Stags, but at the same time, we don't passionately dislike them as we do supposedly Grimsby Town. But it's a great game to have this early in the season. I mean, I miss Barnsley, so I miss that atmosphere. But I think back to us playing Mansfield in, was it the title season where Kellen Gordon scored for us late on? Did we draw that game? If I remember correctly. And I just, there's an atmosphere at Mansfield because it's so close. You know it's going to be 10,000 capacity, and not because, this is a good point to make, to be fair, not because they're just a big team. So like Barnsley, Sheffield Wednesday, Sunderland, it's going to be a big game because they're big sides. Mansfield aren't a big team. That's no disrespect to them. We're not a big team. But it'll be 10,000 because it'll be 10,000 because of the game, because it's close, because of a lot of different reasons. And quite often, actually, they're the atmospheres that I find a little bit better because Barnsley go away, right? Portsmouth go away, Sunderland go away. They take that number all the time. And if you take 2,000 every single week, everywhere you go, there's going to be some games where they're quiet. And there's been some fans, I can't think of off the top of my head, last year, where they filled the Stacey West and you could have heard a mouse fart in there after about 35 minutes. Whereas, Mansfield won't take 2,000 to Leyton Orient or Bristol Rovers or wherever, but they'll bring it here. So it's a big day out for them, like it will be for us going to Mansfield. There'll be the same number going there. And I think that kind of adds to the atmosphere. Guaranteed there's going to be a flare. Guaranteed there's going to be a smoke bomb. Guaranteed there's going to be some knobhead right down in the corner at Mansfield who's wearing some sort of identifiable clothing that means everybody can pick him out, like the real Slim Shady at Sheffield Wednesday. Guaranteed a knobhead comes on the pitch. And it's that kind of, this is brilliant. For the Skubala era, this is brilliant. It's better than playing Accrington and Morecambe for the first couple of games. When we came back from COVID, and we had Fleetwood the first game, and people were talking about that, I feel disconnected. If we'd had Mansfield first game, bang, no disconnection then, because football is fueled not just by love, but by hate. If you're playing a team that you hate, it's easier to find that kind of fuel and catch fire. Whereas if you're playing a team that's indifferent, Morecambe have done well, they've brought 20 rather than 15. Nice it is. Fuck nice it is.
I think it's a really interesting point as well, because I don't think, to me, it will feel like much of a rivalry when I'm sat away from the stadium watching it on Saturday, watching it on the TV. I don't think I'll feel that kind of enraged at something that happens on the pitch, because it doesn't feel like it'll be a rivalry. But I guarantee if I was sat on my seat in the front row of lower six, I'd be up and jumping about and screaming just as much as everybody else and getting right into it. And you'd feel that level of rivalry. You'd feel that feeling when you're walking down Sincil Bank after the game and there are Mansfield fans to one side of you or whatever, and you'll feel that this is a rivalry. Obviously, light-hearted and all of that when you walk away from the ground. Nobody wants to be fighting walking down Sincil Bank, but you'll know that there's that extra kind of level to it than there maybe would be if you were playing against a Morecambe or an Accrington. So it's a real interesting one with that, and I'm looking forward to kind of watching that from a different perspective as well. Although I really, really wish I was there.
Sure. Quick question then, and for anyone listening at home, you can chime in on this if you wish. What's your favourite Lincoln Mansfield memory, Charlie? And I'll give you a chance to think about it, and because I can drop mine in. And we played away there at the beginning of the 2006-07 season. I won't forget it. I think I got a lift there with Paul Stimpson, who was my boss at the time, and Casey as well, DJ Casey. And we went along, and I said Casey couldn't get in for some reason. The stewards wouldn't let him in, and he ended up having to watch it in a pub nearby. And Jamie Forrester scored 4 goals. Now, memory might serve me wrong here, but something tells me he got a first half hat trick, and I'm going to Google it as we talk. I'm sure he got a first half hat trick. I think we won 4-2 in the end, but yeah, it was outstanding. And the other one, and this is really bizarre, it was when the away end was the other end of the ground. Was now, what year was it? Be 2001. We hadn't won away in 11 months, and it was, I think John Reams had just stepped down. We hadn't won away, and we went there and we won. And I want to say 3-0, and it was just absolutely incredible because we were awful. We were dire. I went there with Paul Owen, the guy that used to be a steward. Paul, I picked him up at the Victory. I remember that really well. And it's funny, isn't it? Both of my favourite Mansfield Town Lincoln games are games where we've gone there and we've won by big numbers. I'm just going to confirm now. So the Jamie Forrester game, August 2006. Yeah, 3-0 up inside 30 minutes. And the 2001 game, we won 3-2 in the 2001 game. And interestingly enough, we were 3-0 up. Steve Holmes, Paul Smith and Lee Thorpe. I remember it now because we'd thrown away a 3-0 lead against Barnet and lost 4-3 earlier in the season. And then Mansfield scored twice. Shane Bradley, who later played for us, and Mark Blake. Interesting. Yeah, Chris Greenacre up front. He was a good player. Sorry, so your favourite Mansfield memory, Charlie?
Do you know what? It would just have to be... I can't say it would... It's weird because... I can't really say the away draw in the title winning season because although that very much pushed us up towards winning that title, I wasn't there. I'd never been to Mansfield until last season when I just did it to tip the ground off. So I don't know. I can't even vividly remember the 1-1 draw at home that season. Weirdly.
I can't. That was when Kellen Gordon scored and we thought we'd won it 5 minutes from time, and then was it Jacob Mellis scored for them in the last minute and we drew 1-1? Well, I know it was. I've got it on Soccer Base in front
I do remember that one. Yes. So, you know, I'm going to have to go for that one because bear in mind, we haven't won we haven't beat Mansfield in the league since I was 3.
No.
Yep.
Really?
Yep. We have not beat Mansfield in the league since I was 3. 18th of August 2007. 3 days before my 4th birthday. So that was I bear in mind I didn't do my first Lincoln game until I was 11.
Nathan Arnold came on for them that day. There you go. And Michael Balding scored for them. He was another one. I remember us playing Mansfield a few years ago, and I want to say, I can't remember when it was now. Would it be we were getting thrashed at home? That's it. Lincoln 1, Mansfield 4. We were 3-0 down at half time. And it wasn't long, but after, do you remember? Well, you won't remember it, but Neville Southall had gone and done a sit down at half time at the post. He hadn't got in because Everton had been so bad. He sat by the post at half time. And I went out as poacher at half time of that game. And I literally just sat in the middle of the centre circle and I refused to do anything because I thought I was making a statement about how bad we were. And I really wasn't. And then we scored straight after half-time, Lee Thorpe, and then they scored immediately after that, like 47 or 48 minutes. And the Lincoln team, that game, for those who want to reminisce, February 2002, so just before we went into administration, Alan Marriott, Grant Brown, Paul Morgan, Mark Bailey, Stuart Bimson. I mean, already it's looking like one of the best Lincoln sides you can imagine. It goes downhill. Ian Hamilton, Kingsley Black. Oh, God, he was awful for us. John Finnegan, Ben Sedgemore, Lee Thorpe, and Tony Battersby. Unbelievable. Right. I think we ought to move on, don't you? We're just waffling about Lincoln and Mansfield. So we're coming on to any other business. Now, I did see something about the fan engagement index and Lincoln being fourth. I haven't seen an official press release about it, though, so we can't cover it. But just once again, I think Cambridge was the best run side. Cambridge, Exeter, Carlisle, and then us in League One last season. So just an example of we do things right. When an official press release comes out, we'll cover it on the podcast. But the official press release for a huge event next Sunday has come out, and that's my dad's charity walk, which I just wanted to mention. So we are going to do the Bardney to Rugby walk. So it's around 10 miles next Sunday in AIDS of Cancer Research. We've had a phenomenal support already, so I think we're up to 1,400 quid on the Just Giving page, which is absolutely outstanding. That does include a whopping £165 for the signed shirt that the club I bought it and we got signed by the players on eBay from Mark Torkington, so we're going to present that to him in the fan zone on Saturday. So that was outstanding. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. We have another one on eBay at the moment, which is a TJ Ioma signed match worn shirt, which was kindly donated by another Stacey West fan or reader, Richard Harvey, and he's also given us another TJ Ioma match worn shirt to auction after this one. So there's 3 shirts altogether which are going to go towards a total. So thank you to anybody that has already sponsored. You can find details of it on the site, and I will doubtless be retweeting and that sort of stuff. I'll put a link in the comments or whatever people do when they want you to go to something after watching a video. Linking comments, they say, don't they? And then they do, guys, linking comments. So yeah, we were aiming for £500, so we have absolutely smashed that by 300%. Maybe I should have paid attention to maths GCSE anyway, Charlie. So brilliant. Well, look, 52 minutes. I think we can call that as Stacey West podcast episode 312. Charlie's going to sit out on his balcony drinking sangria with his top off, no doubt. His forehead looks a little bit burnt, but he can't afford 2 bottles of sun cream to cover all of his forehead. Sorry, Charlie, go on.
Well, I also can't afford an apartment with a balcony, nor could I probably afford sangria.
Oh dear. What's the Spanish? A Spanish lager. Madrid.
I've got Boomers. I've got a cider at the minute. I've got Boomers on, by the way. This will be awful for listeners. My little Stacey West coaster.
Oh, okay. I've actually got a coaster here, which was one that was produced for the title winning season, I think. Right. Well, Charlie interrupted rudely my outro, so we will just we'll carry it on. So it's the Imps and Mansfield this weekend. It's the resumption of hostilities. Apparently, we haven't beaten them in the league, I've now been told, in 18 years, which is utterly phenomenal. Will it be a year longer after tomorrow? If you're listening to it on Friday, possibly not. One thing, it's going to be a big event at Sinsel Bank. I'm not sure as yet who's going to be taking you through it over the weekend. I think we're going live on Saturday night. It could be Ben, although I may now be available. I think it was originally going to be me and Chris. You'll find out if you get to tune in. Other than that, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, we've been the Stacey West podcast. We have been brilliant as ever. I hope that you agree with us. We will be back sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, all that remains to be said is...
Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.